It is always lovely having you here, settling in for a quiet moment at the end of a long day. Tonight's gentle journey drifts far below the surface of the ocean, into a world where sunlight fades away, colours dissolve into blue, and life learns to move through darkness as if it were a kind of slow, underwater night. Before we sink into that world together, may I ask where you are listening from this evening? I always enjoy seeing viewers from all across the globe, each person drifting into this calm little corner of the internet in their own time zone and their own rhythm. And while you are here, if you would be kind enough to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, it truly helps these quiet explorations reach others who might also appreciate a peaceful way to end the day. To everyone who is already subscribed, thank you. And if you have not yet done so, you are welcome to tap the notifications bell, just so you do not miss the next upload when it gently appears. Hopefully this video is not so fascinating that it keeps you awake longer than you planned. But if it does, at least you will drift off with a few new deep-sea curiosities swirling softly in your mind. So let us take a slow breath. Allow the day to loosen its grip and begin our descent into the quietest wilderness on Earth. What lives in a place where no sunlight has ever reached? Down here in the deep sea, the rules of life quietly reshape themselves. There is no day or night, only an endless twilight fading into pure darkness. Pressure rises with every meter, gently compressing the space around you until it feels as though the entire ocean is standing still. Temperatures fall close to freezing. Colours shift from gentle blues to muted greys, and then finally into black, where sight becomes less important than touch, vibration, and the faintest glimmers of drifting light. Tonight's journey will take us through these layers, drifting from the fading surface light into regions that feel otherworldly, exploring how life survives, evolves, and glows in places humans were never meant to visit. The deep sea is vast, ancient and mysterious, and yet it is gentle in its own way, a world shaped by silence, darkness, and remarkable resilience. So settle in, breathe slowly, and let the ocean draw you a little deeper. The water around you begins as a familiar shade of blue, the kind you might recognize from calm afternoons near a shoreline. But as you drift downward, that blue slowly deepens, as though someone is lowering a dimmer switch on the entire world. Sunlight stretches only so far, and with every gentle meter of descent its warmth begins to thin and soften. The brightness above you feels like a distant ceiling, and the surface itself becomes a hazy memory, rather than a place you can still reach with a quick kick of your legs. Here, the ocean begins to exhale, and you can feel the first subtle shift from the lively upper waters into a quieter, more contemplative space. The twilight zone begins around the point where sunlight no longer feels strong enough to illuminate shapes clearly. Instead of beaming down in bright rays, light arrives as a muted wash, slipping through the water in soft gradients. It is still bright enough for you to notice the colour of your surroundings, but too dim for plants to survive. No algae bloom here. No drifting fields of plankton thriving on sunshine. This is where the last green leaves the ocean entirely, replaced by blues that slowly desaturate as though the world is being painted over in dusk. The twilight zone marks a boundary between two ways of living. Above it, countless species depend on sunlight to power their daily rhythms. Below it, life learns to navigate a world where the rules change, where things drift rather than dart, and where energy is scarce. Even the water feels slightly heavier on your skin, not from pressure yet, but from the calm, steady weight of being somewhere light does not quite understand. Colours begin to behave differently the deeper you go. Reds vanish first, disappearing within the first few dozen meters. Oranges fade after that, followed by yellows, until even bright greens lose their sharpness. What was once a full spectrum becomes a gentle chorus of blues, then deeper blues, and eventually slate tones. If a red fish swims by at this depth, its vibrant colour will not appear red at all, but instead a soft grey, as though its scales have forgotten what shade they once were. Down here, camouflage is not achieved with flashes of colour, but by simply existing in a place where colour can no longer speak. Sound changes too, although it is harder to notice at first. In shallow water, noise travels in quick, clean pulses, but in the twilight zone the water feels thicker with silence between each vibration. Distant clicks, soft rumbles and faint splashes from the surface lose their brightness. Instead, sounds stretch slightly, travelling farther but growing softer, like whispers carried through long hallways. Everything feels slower, not in a sleepy way, but in the way a library feels slower than a marketplace. Temperature begins its quiet descent here as well. The warmth of the sunlit upper waters diminishes, and a subtle chill seeps into the surroundings. It is not yet the deep cold of the abyss, but you can feel the first hints of it brushing against you. The water becomes clearer, strangely enough, as particles and drifting life from above become less common. You're surrounded by a kind of clarity that makes distances hard to judge, a gentle emptiness that feels both peaceful and slightly uncanny. And then, as if the ocean decides you're ready, the darkness begins to sparkle. Tiny pinpricks of pale blue light blink in the distance like stars caught in drifting currents. These are some of the earliest glowing creatures you will meet, small plankton that emit brief flashes, jelly-like animals with faint ghostly halos, and miniature fish that carry tiny lanterns along their sides. Their glow is not strong, but it is unmistakable. In a world where sunlight falters, these quiet lights feel like the first signs that life has found its own way to create a kind of underwater night sky. Many of these animals glow for reasons you might not expect. Some use their lights to hide, matching the faint brightness above them so predators below cannot spot their silhouettes. Others glow to confuse or distract, releasing a puff of shimmering particles when startled, like a magician vanishing behind a curtain of blue dust. A few use light to communicate, sending brief signals to one another that look almost like messages written in tiny drifting sparks. You might notice slender bodies drifting just out of view, moving with the calm efficiency of creatures that rarely waste energy. Lanternfish glide in gentle pulses, their bellies dotted with small glowing spots arranged almost like constellations. Squid drift with slow, rhythmic movements, sometimes trailing faint glimmers behind them. Even some jellies glow from within, their bodies shining softly as though holding a lantern made of water. This twilight world has an atmosphere unlike any other part of the ocean. It is not frightening, not overwhelming, and not empty. It is simply different. A borderland between the bright energy of the surface and the dark stillness of the deeper layers. Here life continues in quieter, more deliberate rhythms. Movements are smoother, shapes more fluid. Nothing rushes unless it must. Everything drifts with the gentle patience of a world where time itself seems to stretch. As you sink farther, the familiar world of light and waves begins to fall away. The sensation is not of losing something, but of transitioning into a different kind of space. one where you're not expected to hurry or understand everything at once. The ocean invites you to observe rather than interpret, to drift rather than direct, to notice rather than reach. The twilight zone is a place of thresholds. It is where sunlight tries its best but can no longer keep up. It is where plants surrender but animals adapt. It is where colours fade but glowing life begins to appear. And it is where your journey into the true deep ocean truly begins, 1 gentle metre at a time. As you descend through this dim and quiet region, you may find yourself wondering a simple question that has intrigued scientists for decades. If the ocean changes this quickly, with only a little loss of light, what transformations await farther below where sunlight never reaches at all? In the quiet dimness beneath the fading sunlight, the water begins to change in a way that feels almost otherworldly. The last hints of daylight grow thinner, softer, and cooler, and for a moment it seems as though the ocean might slip into complete darkness. But instead of going fully black, the water starts to sparkle. Not brightly, not dramatically, but with gentle points of light that appear and vanish like tiny thoughts drifting through the mind of the sea. This is where bioluminescence begins to reveal itself, not as a rare trick, but as a common language whispered throughout the deep. Bioluminescence is surprisingly simple at its core. It happens when certain naturally occurring chemicals inside an organism come together and release light. There is no warmth to it, no burning, no flame. The glow is cool and steady, more like the soft shimmer of a snowflake under moonlight than anything fiery or intense. Many deep-sea creatures can control this glow with delicate precision, switching it on only when needed, dimming it to blend in, or brightening it to startle something lurking nearby. In a place where energy is precious and light is scarce, this gentle control becomes a lifeline. If you were to hover quietly in this part of the ocean and watch the glow around you, you might notice something very striking. Nearly all of it is blue. Not the blue of a summer sky, but a pale, silvery blue that glides through the water without fading. Water absorbs colours unevenly. Reds disappear quickly, yellows and greens soon after, but blue holds on. It slips through the depths with the least resistance, travelling farther than any other colour. Because of that, creatures that glow blue stand the greatest chance of being seen by the eyes that matter, and avoided by the ones that do not. Animals create this light in several different ways. Some make the necessary chemicals themselves, crafting tiny reservoirs of glow tucked beneath their skin. Others inherit their glow from the food they eat, passing luminescent molecules along like borrowed lanterns. And then there are creatures that house glowing bacteria inside special organs. In these partnerships, the bacteria produce the light while the host offers shelter, like a living lantern carrying its own tiny colony of sparks. The deep sea uses bioluminescence with astonishing creativity. For some animals, glowing is a method of staying hidden. A fish drifting beneath the faint remaining light might glow gently along its belly, matching the lingering brightness from above so that predators looking upward cannot see its outline. This technique is so effective that countless species rely on it. It is as though the ocean teaches camouflage not through colour, but through imitation of the fading sky. Other creatures use their glow to hunt. A dragonfish, almost invisible in the dark, carries a tiny glowing lure at the end of a slender filament that extends from its jaw. The lure pulses softly, an imitation of a drifting snack. Small animals, curious and hungry, move closer to investigate, and in an instant the dragonfish strikes. Its teeth are so clear and thin that they almost vanish against the darkness, making its mouth seem like an opening in the water rather than a living animal. Meanwhile, flashlight fish glide through the shadows with glowing organs just beneath their eyes. These organs are equipped with thin flaps of skin that can swing open or closed. When the flaps lift, the fish displays two pale blue orbs that light its path. When danger approaches, the flaps can snap shut, erasing the lights in less than a heartbeat. In this way, the fish can vanish into the dark simply by closing its eyelids, leaving predators momentarily confused. Some of the most mesmerizing lights in the sea belong to creatures that drift rather than swim. Long chains of jelly-like beings, known as siphonophores, glow in soft, undulating waves. They are not single animals, but colonies made up of many individual units that function together. Some specialize in feeding, some in movement, others in reproduction. When they glow, they create shimmering ribbons that look like slow-moving waterfalls made of light, descending through the dark from nowhere in particular to nowhere specific at all. Other jellies have rings of bioluminescence pulsing along the edges of their bodies. Some release glowing clouds when startled, producing a drifting burst of light that distracts predators long enough for them to slip away. These glowing clouds resemble tiny galaxies, spreading softly through the water before fading into calm darkness once more. Not all uses of bioluminescence are dramatic. Some are gentle, almost understated. Certain plankton flash when touched, creating trembling trails of tiny sparks. When a large animal swims through a cloud of them, it becomes outlined in sudden points of light, revealing its shape for a moment before the glow disappears. This can be helpful for creatures that want to avoid larger predators, who may sense the disturbance and steer away. Still, light can also become a beacon for companionship. Many deep-sea animals live solitary lives, drifting through a habitat so large and empty that finding another of their kind can be astonishingly rare. For them, bioluminescence becomes a way of reaching out. A certain rhythm of flashes might signal readiness to mate. Another pattern might help individuals recognize members of their own species. In such a dark world, a single soft glow can be the difference between remaining alone and continuing a lineage. The patterns themselves can be surprisingly intricate. Some fish have delicate arrangements of glowing spots along their sides, almost like dotted constellations. These patterns are unique to each species and sometimes even to each individual. When one fish glides past another, the precise arrangement of lights tells a story that only creatures of its kind can understand. As you drift deeper into this glowing realm, the ocean starts to feel less like a place defined by darkness, and more like a stage where light is used sparingly, but beautifully. Every glimmer you see serves a purpose. A faint glow means safety. A brief flash means danger. A series of pulses might lead a creature to food or companionship. In every direction, light curls and drifts with the currents, appearing just long enough to be noticed, then slipping back into quiet. Even though the deep sea is vast beyond imagination, bioluminescence gives it a sense of gentle connection. These lights make the darkness feel inhabited rather than empty. They reveal that life is not simply surviving here, but communicating, hunting, hiding, and living in ways that can seem almost poetic. As the glow around you fades and the water grows darker once more, you may find yourself thinking not about the light itself, but about what it reveals. In a place where the sun cannot reach, life has written its own method of illumination. and it makes you wonder what other quiet strategies the deep ocean holds, tucked away in the layers that lie even farther below. The deeper you drift, the more the ocean begins to settle around you. It does not feel heavy in the way a weight might press on your shoulders. Instead, it feels steady, consistent, almost like a quiet presence that grows firmer with each meter you descend. This sensation, though subtle at first, is the beginning of pressure, the invisible weight of the water above you. And in the deep sea, pressure becomes one of the most defining features of life. Pressure can be a difficult idea to imagine, especially when the water feels so calm and weightless around you. But the easiest way to think about it is simply this. The deeper you go, the more water there is above you, and that water gently pushes down from all directions. Near the surface, that push is light, barely noticeable. Far below, the push becomes far stronger, not harsh or sudden, but steady and immense, like the quiet hold of a vast and ancient world. For a human or a machine, this kind of pressure would be overwhelming. Our bodies and the structures we build contain air-filled spaces, and air is easily compressed. If you carried a hollow object into deeper waters, the water around it would press inward, trying to squeeze the space smaller and smaller. Submarines require thick walls and strong supports because they must resist a force that constantly tries to fold them inward. But deep-sea creatures do not resist the pressure. They embrace it. One of the reasons they're not crushed is that they do not contain many of the air-filled spaces that land animals rely on. Instead of rigid lungs full of compressible air, they often rely on gills or membranes that stay effective even under incredible force. Their bodies are shaped by the environment itself, soft, flexible, adaptable. Bones, if they exist at all, are lightweight and slightly bendable. Cartilage often replaces bone entirely. Internal organs are cushioned by thick layers of gel-like substances that do not collapse under pressure. Even the spaces inside their cells are carefully balanced so that nothing inside them tries to expand or contract. Everything flows with the water, not against it. Many deep-sea creatures have bodies so fluid that they seem almost sculpted from the water itself. Fish at great depths often have very little muscle mass, no swim bladders, and almost no solid structure. Instead of fighting the pressure, they allow the environment to define their form. The pressure outside and the pressure inside are equal, so there is no struggle, no crushing force, no internal collapse. Life simply adjusts, the way a gentle song might adjust to the acoustics of a cavern. Some animals have evolved even more unusual features. There are fish whose tissues are infused with the gelatinous substance that gives them a soft buoyancy. This gel works as a kind of natural cushion, holding their shape while allowing their bodies to shift slightly as pressure changes. Their faces may look saggy or their limbs droopy when brought toward the surface, not because something is wrong with them, but because they were never meant to exist anywhere except in the steady grip of the deep. Bring them upward, and the balance they rely on vanishes. Down below, though, everything makes sense. Pressure also affects behavior. With such immense weight settling from all sides, moving quickly becomes costly. Fast bursts of movement require energy, and energy is not something the deep ocean provides in abundance. So animals drift, glide, pulse, and float. They conserve strength not out of laziness, but because the environment encourages slowness. The deep sea is not a place for hurried motions. It is a place where life learns to move with intention, not force. If you pause and simply let yourself settle in the water, you might notice something unusual. The deeper you are, the quieter everything becomes, Pressure does not make sound, but it seems to encourage silence. Movements are dampened, vibrations absorbed, currents muffled. Even the faint hum of distant life seems softened. The weight of the ocean creates a stillness that feels peaceful rather than oppressive, as though the sea has its own way of calming everything within it. This stillness allows strange and delicate creatures to thrive. Animals that might seem fragile on the surface move with surprising ease here. Translucent fish hover as if suspended in a forgotten dream. Organisms that would collapse under their own weight on land float gracefully, every movement tuned to the rhythm of the water around them. Pressure, in its own way, becomes a kind of supporting structure. It holds these creatures together. It stabilizes them. It makes their softness possible. Even creatures with firmer bodies, like certain deep-sea sharks or large squid, carry adaptations shaped by pressure. Their muscles are dense but not overly compact. Their organs are reinforced with special proteins that prevent cells from becoming brittle. Their blood chemistry is tuned to function without faltering. Everything is balanced to work smoothly in an environment where the weight of the water is constant and unrelenting. Pressure also influences how animals perceive the world. With fewer air pockets and more fluid-filled spaces, sound travels differently inside their bodies. Vibration becomes a more important sense than hearing. Touch becomes more valuable than sight. Many creatures navigate by feeling the pressure changes around them, detecting subtle shifts in currents or distant movement. It is a kind of atmospheric awareness, the ability to interpret the soft tremors of the sea instead of relying solely on vision or sound. As you descend even farther, you might begin to feel the change yourself, not as a physical squeeze, but as a shift in atmosphere. The water grows cooler, the light grows dimmer, the world grows steadier. You are entering a realm shaped not by wind or waves, but by patience, weight, and quiet. The surface becomes a memory. The shallows feel far away. Down here, the ocean teaches a different pace. Pressure may sound like a harsh force, but in the deep sea it becomes something gentler. It is the steady background to every life form, a constant quiet presence that sculpts bodies and behaviors without violence. It encourages calm. It rewards softness. It turns fragility into strength and stillness into survival. And as you drift through this gradually deepening world, you may begin to sense something subtle about the creatures that call it home. They are not merely enduring the pressure, they are shaped by it, balanced by it, and perfectly suited to its embrace. It is one of the many reminders that life, when given enough time, can adapt to almost anything, even the immense weight of an entire ocean resting above it. Eventually, as the last traces of the twilight zone fade away, and the water becomes cooler and dimmer still, a thought might settle in alongside you. If life can thrive under such immense weight, reshaping itself in silence and softness, what other transformations await in the colder, darker layers that lie even deeper below? The deeper you drift, the more the water around you begins to cool, and it does so with a quiet persistence. It is not a sudden shock or a sharp drop in temperature. Instead, the warmth fades gradually, like the slowing of a long, steady breath. Layer by layer, the ocean loses the last traces of sun-heated water, until eventually you find yourself surrounded by a chill so consistent it feels almost timeless. Here, in the deep sea, cold is not a passing condition, it is a way of life. Near the surface, temperatures can change with the seasons, the weather, or even the hour, but down here, the cold is permanent. The water hovers just above freezing, a degree or two warmer than ice, and it stays that way every day of every year. No storms bring warmer currents, no heat waves ripple downward. The deep sea keeps its temperature with the loyalty of stone. It is one of the most stable environments on the planet. A world measured not in days or seasons, but in geological stretches of time. Life adjusts accordingly. In this cold, biochemical reactions slow down, energy moves more reluctantly, and muscles take longer to respond. But instead of fighting these changes, deep-sea creatures lean into them with graceful acceptance. Their bodies are shaped by patience, their rhythms are slower, their movements are measured in glides and drifts rather than fuss or urgency. Down here, haste is unnecessary and warmth is a luxury nothing depends on. Consider the drifting jellies. Many of them inhabit these chilly depths with surprising elegance. Their bodies, made mostly of water themselves, pulse in slow, hypnotic patterns that seem to match the temperature around them. Their tentacles trail like ribbons caught in a gentle current. Each pulse of movement conserves energy, with no wasted effort. They are creatures perfectly comfortable moving at the speed the cold dictates. Nothing about them suggests struggle. Instead, they feel like part of the rhythm of the water itself. Then there is the Greenland shark, a creature so unhurried it can live for centuries. It prefers frigid waters and deep, slow currents. Its heart beats at a pace so gradual it seems almost improbable for an animal of its size. Its metabolism is among the slowest known for any vertebrate, a biological adaptation to a life spent in temperatures that would freeze many animals into stillness. Yet the Greenland shark thrives, drifting through darkness with a calm endurance that speaks to the advantages of moving slowly through a cold world. Cold shapes not only how animals move, but how they grow, hunt, rest, and even age. Many deep-sea creatures mature over long stretches of time, their bodies developing at a pace that mirrors the steady cold surrounding them. They do not sprint toward adulthood. They arrive gradually, as though in no hurry whatsoever. With fewer predators and scarce food, there is little incentive to rush through life. In these temperatures, a fast metabolism would be a dangerous waste of energy. Food rarely appears in large amounts, and the cold means digestion is slow. Instead, creatures have evolved metabolisms that conserve every possible calorie. A fish in the deep sea might eat a single large meal and then not feed again for a very long time, using its energy so efficiently that hunger becomes more of a distant memory than a constant drive. Cold makes this possible. Cold allows it. Movement, too, becomes a careful negotiation with the environment. Quick darting actions would drain precious energy reserves. So deep-sea animals glide rather than race. They make use of buoyancy, drifting on currents instead of swimming against them. A jellyfish might pulse only occasionally, relying on the water to carry it the rest of the way. A fish might hover motionlessly, moving only when absolutely necessary. Even predators adjust to this slower pace, often lying in wait instead of chasing prey over long distances. The cold also influences how creatures sense their surroundings. In warmer waters, animals often rely heavily on speed and agility. But in the deep, where everything moves sedately, senses must work differently. Many species are tuned to vibrations or faint chemical signals rather than visual cues. A tiny shift in water pressure might reveal the presence of prey. A slow drifting glow could mark the path of another creature. Cold sets the tempo, and every adaptation responds to that quiet rhythm. Some animals embrace the cold so thoroughly that their bodies would not function properly without it. Certain proteins inside their cells are designed to fold correctly only at low temperatures, bring them toward warmth, and those proteins lose shape, ceasing to function as intended. These creatures are not simply tolerant of the cold, they depend on it. It is the foundation of their biology. The deep-sea environment also lacks many of the rapid changes that come with shallower waters. Without sunlight, there is no cycle of warming and cooling. Without surface storms, there are no sudden surges of temperature. Without seasons, there are no pulses of heat to shift behavior. Life here moves at the steady pace the cold has set, and this constancy allows extremely long-lived species to flourish. Some corals grow only fractions of a millimeter per year. Some sponges remain virtually unchanged for centuries. The ocean's cold is not a challenge to overcome, but a sculptor carving life into slow, enduring forms. This chilled stillness becomes part of the deep sea's character. It shapes how animals swim, how they breathe, how they think and behave. It softens movements, lengthens lifespans, and creates a world where urgency feels out of place. Even the water itself moves differently here. Cold currents slide along the seafloor with quiet determination, carrying nutrients that fall from above in gentle, steady rain. As you drift through these colder layers, you might feel the calm settling into you too. The ocean's chill is not sharp or hostile. It is steady, patient, and soothing in its own slow way. The water feels ancient, as though it has been holding this temperature since long before civilizations rose on land. It gives the deep sea a sense of timelessness, a feeling that life here is unbothered by the rush of seasons or the urgency of change. And while the cold shapes everything it touches, it does so without hurry or pressure. It sculpts creatures slowly, smoothing away what is unnecessary, encouraging what can endure. It reminds you that in the deepest parts of the world, life succeeds not by racing forward, but by adjusting to the quiet, steady chill that defines this realm. As the cold deepens around you and the last traces of surface warmth disappear, you may find yourself wondering how creatures adapt not only to chill and darkness, but to the complete absence of sunlight that lies ahead, a darkness so total that the idea of day loses meaning entirely. The last traces of twilight are left behind so gradually that the moment of true darkness almost slips past unnoticed. 1 meter you can still sense a faint blue, and the next the colour has quietly dissolved into a soft, velvety black. This is the midnight zone, a realm where sunlight is not weak or distant, but entirely absent. No dawn has ever reached these depths. No flicker from the surface has ever pierced this water. The darkness is complete, ancient, and steady. Like a curtain the ocean has drawn and never once lifted. In a place where light vanishes completely, vision becomes a fragile luxury. Some creatures here still carry eyes, large, reflective, round, designed to gather the faintest scraps of bioluminescence drifting from nearby life. Others have reduced their eyes to small pale specks that seem more symbolic than functional. And many species have abandoned the idea entirely. For them, sight has no value. Their world is shaped instead by pressure, vibration, chemistry, and touch. Because of this, many animals in the midnight zone rely on senses that feel almost foreign when compared to the senses familiar on land. A faint disturbance in the water might reveal the presence of prey. A subtle shift in pressure might mark the path of a drifting creature several body lengths away. Chemical trails, so diluted they would be undetectable anywhere else, linger long enough in the cold, still water to provide information about who passed through recently. The residents of this region are a gallery of the deep sea's most memorable shapes. The viperfish drifts with a slow, confident stillness, its long fangs curving upward in a way that seems dramatic until you realize they serve a simple function: holding on to prey in a world where letting go could mean waiting days or weeks for another meal. Its lean body is designed for patience, not pursuit. Lanternfish drift past with delicate lights dotted along their sides. These tiny glowing organs help them blend into what faint overhead brightness remains from the layers above. To predators below, their silhouettes disappear. To each other, the glows form a language of quiet signals, guidance, spacing, and subtle identification. Then there are the ceaseless drifters, the jellies whose bodies move with slow pulses that seem timed to the gentle rhythm of the water itself. Their bells expand and contract in smooth waves, pushing them forward without urgency. Their tentacles trail behind them like drifting threads, catching tiny morsels or detecting small changes in the currents. Some glow faintly from within, but the glow is not for sight. It is part of the way they communicate with the darkness, a soft signature whispered to the surrounding water. Certain deep-sea squid glide through this zone with elegant control, using small fin movements to adjust their direction before settling into another long glide. Some species produce tiny sparks or shimmering rings of light along their arms, not bright enough to illuminate the space, but enough to signal intent to others of their kind. Even the crustaceans here tell their own quiet stories. Long-legged shrimp wave their antennae ahead of them, sweeping the water like delicate instruments tuned to the faintest tremors. Their bodies move with a deliberate grace, as though each step is considered carefully before it is taken. Small crabs navigate the rocky ledges with surprising precision, guided by touch rather than sight. The midnight zone is shaped by silence every bit as much as by darkness. Movements feel softened, vibrations fade quickly. There are no sudden noises or rushing currents. Most animals make only the smallest adjustments as they drift through the water. Energy conservation is essential in a place where food is scarce and cold slows every biological process. This is an environment that encourages stillness, not through force, but through quiet efficiency. Some of the most iconic deep-sea creatures live here, perfectly suited to the dark. The anglerfish waits among the shadows, holding its small glowing lure just in front of its mouth. The light moves gently, imitating a drifting speck of life. A curious animal might wander close, drawn by the promise of a meal, only to find itself enveloped by the wide jaws waiting behind the glow. The anglerfish does not chase. It simply holds its position until opportunity arrives. The gulper eel wanders in long fluid motions, its tail tapering behind it, and its wide mouth capable of opening far larger than its body might suggest. Its design is not about elegance, but about possibility. The ability to swallow prey of all shapes in a world where availability matters more than selectiveness. Even the smaller residents of the midnight zone seem to embody the stillness of their environment. Tiny gelatinous organisms drift like seeds carried by invisible breezes. Small fish hover weightlessly, conserving energy by remaining suspended for long stretches without moving more than a fin or two. There is a slow beauty to the midnight zone. The darkness is not oppressive. It feels consistent, dependable, almost serene. Life continues at a pace that feels deliberate rather than rushed. There is time for everything here, and nothing wastes energy on unnecessary haste. The ocean's heartbeat feels slower, its movements more thoughtful. Despite the absence of light, this region does not feel empty. It feels inhabited in ways that are subtle rather than obvious. Every quiet drift, every faint flicker, every gentle pulse of movement suggests a world that has grown comfortable with its own darkness. Life here does not oppose the environment, it harmonizes with it. And in this vast quiet, deeper layers lie below, colder, heavier, stranger, waiting with their own stories, shaped not just by darkness but by forces even more profound. In the deep sea, beauty takes on shapes that feel wonderfully unexpected. Patterns, bodies and colours that might seem unusual on the surface become perfectly natural when framed by darkness, cold and calm water. Down here, evolution has shaped creatures with such creativity that the midnight zone begins to feel like a gallery of quiet oddities, each one drifting in its own gentle rhythm. And rather than seeming frightening, many of these animals carry an elegance that comes from being shaped entirely by a world that never asks them to be anything but themselves. Some of the most striking deep-sea creatures have transparent heads, not translucent, fully transparent. The barrel-eye fish might be the most well-known example, with a dome of clear tissue covering the top of its skull like a smooth bubble. Inside that dome, two large green eyes float, pointing upward toward the faint glow from overhead. Those eyes are not fixed like ours. They can rotate, allowing the fish to look forward when needed. It is a design that seems almost whimsical, as if nature decided spectacles were unnecessary when your entire forehead could simply be made of glass. The transparency is not a gimmick. It gives the barrel eye an advantage in dim water where every scrap of light matters. The dome protects those delicate eyes, helps reduce drag, and lets the fish gather the faintest hints of drifting jellyfish or small prey. And in its own quiet way, the barrel-eye is beautiful, an animal shaped perfectly for a world where clarity comes from stillness rather than sunlight. Huge eyes are another common theme in the deep, and they are not there to intimidate. They exist because light is scarce and every photon counts. Some fish carry enormous round eyes that look almost gentle. Their pupils widen to take in the pale glows around them. These eyes soften the creature's expressions, giving even the most specialized hunters a strangely thoughtful appearance. Glowing organs add another layer of beauty. Many deep-sea animals carry little built-in lanterns, dots of light tucked beneath the skin. Some of these lights help them hide. Others help them find each other in the dark. A few species use them to lure prey closer, but even then the glow tends to feel more like a delicate piece of jewelry than a sinister trap. In the deep, illumination is less about spectacle and more about communication. One of the most intriguing residents of these depths is the anglerfish. It has become a symbol of deep-sea strangeness, but its design, once you understand it, is surprisingly elegant. The lure that dangles in front of its face is home to glowing bacteria that produce a soft, enticing light. The anglerfish simply holds still while the glow does the inviting. Patience is one of the deep ocean's greatest currencies, and this fish embodies that patience beautifully. Its teeth curve inward not to frighten, but to prevent a rare meal from drifting out of its mouth. Everything about the anglerfish is shaped for efficiency in a world where food appears unpredictably. Then there is the tripod fish, a creature that seems like it wandered in from a minimalist sketch. It balances on three elongated fin rays, which act almost like stilts, lifting its body just above the seafloor. These fin extensions are surprisingly sturdy, allowing the fish to perch in place while facing into the current with quiet focus. It spreads its fins like small nets, waiting for tiny animals to pass by. There's a kind of grace in its stillness, a lovely reminder that not all beauty comes from motion. Some of it grows from the choice to stay perfectly balanced. Ghost sharks, also known as chimaeras, drift through the depths with pale bodies and a slow, calm sweep of their fins. Their skin has a soft sheen to it, reflecting light in a muted, pearly way. Their faces, with smooth lines and slightly rounded features, give them an almost gentle expression. Despite their name, they are not ghosts at all, merely animals shaped by a quiet world where light does not dictate appearance. Their movements are so fluid that they seem to glide rather than swim, as if the water welcomes them with a familiarity earned over millions of years. Many deep-sea animals have bodies so soft that they seem sculpted from jelly rather than flesh. When the environment offers no surfaces to crash against and no sunlight to damage tissue, animals can afford to be delicate. Gelatinous tissue is efficient, flexible, and perfectly suited to a life spent drifting. Some creatures look as though they're held together by nothing more than the shape of the water around them, yet they function with remarkable precision. It is easy to assume that unusual shapes imply danger or strangeness in the unsettling sense. But the deep sea has its own aesthetic. Here, transparency is a kind of purity. Glow is conversation. Unusual proportions are solutions to very practical problems. Large eyes soften faces. Wide mouths signal adaptation, not aggression. Even the curving fangs of a viperfish have a quiet purpose that makes sense in this world. They ensure a hard-won meal does not float away. There is humour here too, the gentle kind. A fish perched on elegant stilts looks almost like it is waiting politely in a long queue. A barrel-eye staring upward with its floating green eyes seems permanently fascinated by the ceiling. A jelly drifting slowly through the dark resembles a wandering umbrella that let go of its owner long ago. These shapes may be unusual, but they also carry charm. Part of the beauty of deep-sea creatures comes from the fact that none of them are shaped for our eyes. Their designs are free from the expectations of the sunlit world. They're shaped only by darkness, pressure, and silence. And those forces produce forms that look serene rather than alarming. There is calmness in their movements, clarity in their adaptations, and a quiet practicality in every unusual detail. These creatures do not need to impress, intimidate, or perform. They simply exist in a world that shaped them with slow patience, and perhaps that is what makes them so captivating. Their strangeness is not a shock. It is an invitation, a reminder that life evolves into whatever shape the environment allows, and sometimes those shapes are unexpected in the most beautiful way. The deeper regions ahead hold even more adaptations, each one a reflection of the challenges and opportunities that arise in a world far removed from sunlight. Far above the deep sea, sunlight fuels an entire world of motion and growth. Tiny drifting plants soak up the light, small animals feed on them, larger ones feed on those, and the entire system buzzes with constant activity. But as you travel downward, that busy world grows faint, then disappears entirely. Nothing grows in the deep, no sunlight reaches the darkness, and yet life persists here. It does so through a food chain unlike anything on land or in shallow water, slow, sparse, and quietly ingenious. One of the most important sources of nourishment in the deep sea begins with something surprisingly delicate. Tiny particles fall from the upper layers of the ocean in a constant snow-like drift. Scientists call it marine snow, though it is not made of ice or frost. It consists of small fragments of dead plankton, bits of mucus, drifting specks of waste, and the occasional soft clump of organic matter that breaks apart as it sinks. To us, these particles would seem insignificant, but to deep-sea creatures they are the quiet foundation of life. The descent of marine snow is slow, almost impossibly so. A single flake can take weeks to fall through the water, drifting in soft spirals as it travels through the dimming layers. By the time it reaches the deep sea, it is tiny, fragile, and often partially consumed by creatures living in the higher zones. Still, what remains is valuable. To a creature living in near-permanent darkness, even the smallest scrap of organic material can be a precious meal. Because food arrives unpredictably, and often in microscopic amounts, deep-sea animals must be masters of patience. Many species drift rather than swim, conserving energy with an efficiency that would impress even the most disciplined athlete. Their metabolisms are slow, their movements measured, and their diets opportunistic. In a world where meals are rare, there is no shame in eating almost anything that appears. Some creatures specialize in catching marine snow before it hits the seafloor. Small, filter-feeding animals drift with their mouths or tentacles open, scooping up tiny particles as they pass. Others build delicate nets of mucus that catch falling debris like a slow-motion trap. When the net becomes full, the animal consumes the entire structure in a single, nutrient-rich meal, then creates a new one and waits again. For slightly larger species, food scarcity shapes their behavior in striking ways. A fish might spend long hours motionless, saving its strength for brief, well-timed bursts when prey drifts close enough to catch. Many predators in the deep sea are ambush hunters, not because they lack the ability to swim quickly, but because doing so too often would cost more energy than the ecosystem can replace. The balance here is careful. Move only when the reward is worth the effort. The scarcity of food has also led to body designs that seem unusual at first glance. Some deep-sea fish have enormous mouths and extendable jaws, allowing them to swallow prey larger than themselves. This is not excess, it is practicality. If food arrives rarely, being able to take advantage of a large meal when it appears can mean the difference between thriving and starving. Gulper eels, with their wide, curtain-like mouths, are a classic example. They open themselves to whatever opportunity drifts past, no matter how oddly shaped. Other animals store energy in ways that feel almost inventive. Certain deep-sea fish have gelatinous tissues instead of muscle, which reduce their need for calories because such tissues are inexpensive to maintain. Some species accumulate fats or oils that make them both buoyant and well-stocked for times when meals become scarce. Even the simple act of being soft-bodied is an adaptation, allowing animals to conserve resources rather than expend them on dense, energy-costly structures. But every now and then the deep sea receives a gift that goes far beyond drifting snow. When a large animal dies in the upper layers, a whale for instance, its body begins to sink. The descent is slow but inevitable, and when it finally reaches the seafloor it becomes one of the most valuable events in the deep ocean, a whale fall. A whale fall is a feast on a scale that the deep sea rarely experiences. The arrival of such a massive meal can transform a quiet patch of seafloor into a thriving hub of activity. Scavengers gather first. Hagfish, sleeper sharks, giant isopods, and countless other creatures appear seemingly from nowhere, drawn perhaps by scent or subtle chemical signals carried by the currents. They feed for weeks, stripping away soft tissue in deliberate, powerful bites. After the early scavengers finish, other species arrive. Worms burrow into the remaining bone and tissue. Crustaceans pick through the debris. Even microbes take up residence, breaking down fats and oils that would otherwise remain untouched. The skeleton of a whale can support life for decades, becoming a kind of underwater city that cycles through different phases as each group of organisms takes what it needs. Whale falls reveal something profound about the deep sea. Communities here do not rely on steady, predictable food sources. Instead, they have evolved to make the most of both scarcity and abundance. When only tiny flakes of marine snow drift down, life slows. When a large meal arrives, life blooms around it. The deep sea is not barren, only patient. Food chains in the deep are built on efficiency. Every movement, every adaptation, every slow heartbeat is shaped by the need to use energy wisely. There is beauty in this balance, a quiet respect for the resources the ocean provides. Nothing is wasted, nothing is hurried. Even the smallest creature plays its part in a system that sustains itself through careful conservation. This world of drifting particles and rare feasts creates an atmosphere unlike anywhere else on the planet. Life has learned to stretch every calorie, to take advantage of every opportunity, and to wait with extraordinary resilience. The result is a food chain that operates not through abundance, but through thoughtful use of scarcity. And the deeper you travel into this realm, the more unusual the sources of nourishment become, revealing that even in a world so cold and quiet, the ocean still finds ways to sustain life in remarkable, unexpected ways. Far below the drifting snow and the long silent plains of the deep sea, the temperature of the water settles into a near-constant chill. It feels steady, ancient, and unchanging. But on the ocean floor, in scattered pockets where the Earth's crust stretches and cracks, something extraordinary happens. The cold gives way to heat, not a gentle warmth, but a surge of volcanic energy rising straight from the planet's interior. These places are hydrothermal vents, the deep sea's own fireplaces, hidden in a world otherwise shaped entirely by cold. From the outside, they appear as dark chimneys rising from the seafloor. Some look like jagged towers, others resemble clusters of stone pipes. They frequently reach upwards like fragile sculptures, even though they're built from minerals depositing layer by layer, carried upward in the venting water. When the superheated water rushes into the near-freezing ocean, it billows out in thick, smoky plumes. These black smokers, as they are often called, are not smoke at all but clouds of dark minerals that cool and settle in the surrounding water. In the dimness, the plumes twist like slow underwater storms, rising and curling in complete silence. The contrast between the cold water and the venting heat creates an otherworldly landscape, a place that seems more suited to a distant moon than to Earth. Despite the intensity of the heat, these vents are oases of life. They are fueled not by sunlight but by something entirely different. Down here, where light has no influence, plants cannot grow. Photosynthesis is impossible. Instead, life relies on chemosynthesis, a process that uses chemical energy rather than sunlight to create nourishment. The idea sounds complicated, but in gentle terms it is simply this. Certain microbes use the chemicals rising from the vents, things like hydrogen sulfide and methane, as fuel to build the organic matter they need. They are the deep sea's quiet architects, forming the foundation of entire ecosystems. These microbes are capable of turning what looks like toxic water into something that supports life, weaving energy out of chemistry in a place where no other process could. Around these microbes, animals gather. Tube worms are perhaps the most iconic. They stand upright in tall colonies that look almost like fields of pale, waving reeds. But they are not plants. Each tube worm grows inside a long white casing with a bright red plume extending from the top like a soft feathery banner. This plume absorbs chemicals and oxygen from the water, passing them to bacteria living inside the worm's body. The bacteria perform the chemosynthesis. The worm receives nourishment. The partnership is seamless, with each creature relying on the other to survive. Nearby, vent crabs scuttle over the mineral chimneys, their pale bodies blending into the shimmering rock. They feed on the dense microbial mats coating the surfaces, or sometimes on other small creatures living among the vents. They are well adapted to swift changes in temperature, shifting easily between the warm vent water and the freezing ocean surrounding it. The contrast would be harsh for most animals, but vent crabs navigate it as though crossing between two rooms in the same home. Giant clams, mussels and limpets form clusters around the vents, living in close association with bacteria that dwell inside their tissues. These animals no longer need to hunt or graze. Their internal microbes provide them with energy, allowing them to anchor themselves in place for long stretches of time. Their shells grow thick and sturdy, reinforced by the minerals that swirl continuously around the vent fields. Even stranger creatures appear among these volcanic structures. Some have yet to be named. Others move so slowly they are often overlooked entirely. The deep remains full of surprises, especially near vents where new species are still discovered with remarkable frequency. Microbes cling to the vent walls in shimmering layers. Fish hover in the warm plumes. Worms, snails, and tiny shrimp gather in the mineral gardens that form naturally around the chimneys. What makes this all so striking is the contrast. A world of fire inside a world of ice. Heat rising from beneath the crust while freezing water embraces everything from above. Life pushed to its limits, and yet thriving with quiet determination. The landscapes themselves feel almost alien. The mineral towers rise like spires in a dark cathedral, each one releasing plumes of heated water that glow faintly as the minerals catch and scatter the limited light. The ground around them shimmers with sulfide deposits, crusts of metal-rich compounds, and soft mats of microbial growth. It is a place where the ordinary rules of Earth seem suspended, replaced by a set of principles written entirely by geology and chemistry. Despite the harshness of the conditions, these ecosystems are some of the most productive in the deep sea. The sheer quantity of life, microbes, worms, crustaceans, snails, and countless others, creates a sense of bustling activity in a part of the ocean normally defined by slow drifting and sparse populations. For a brief stretch around each vent, the deep feels lively. Hydrothermal vents also reveal how adaptable life truly is. Even without sunlight, even without warmth from above, life finds a way to build networks, partnerships, and entire communities using nothing more than the energy flowing from the Earth's interior. It shows that life is not dependent on a single environment, and that ecosystems can develop in places that feel completely removed from the familiar worlds of land and sky. In many ways, vent fields are among the best examples of what life might look like elsewhere in the universe. Places like the icy moons Europa and Enceladus may hide oceans beneath their frozen crusts, warmed by geological activity below. If life exists there, it may look less like forests and more like these quiet, glowing chemical gardens growing in silence around volcanic vents. Here on Earth, These places remind us that even in the most extreme environments, the coldest, darkest, most pressurized regions of the planet, life still finds footholds. It thrives not in spite of the conditions, but because of them. Far ahead, the vent fields give way once more to the colder, darker plains of the deep sea. The warmth fades, the mineral towers sink into shadow, and the ocean returns to its slow, drifting calm, carrying with it the memory of a world where fire and ice coexist in absolute silent balance. Far beneath the surface, where sunlight has long since faded and plant life is impossible, the deep sea creates its own kind of gardens. They're nothing like the green landscapes on land, and they do not rely on leaves, stems, or roots. Instead, these gardens grow from chemistry, shaped by minerals, microbes, and the slow, steady release of energy from the earth itself. In the darkness, these places appear suddenly, like quiet clearings in a world of shadow. The first sign that you are approaching one of these deep-sea gardens is often a shift in the seafloor's texture. A plain that once looked dark and dusty begins to show pale patches, soft shimmering areas where something seems to be spreading across the ground. These pale coverings are microbial mats, thin layers of bacteria that grow in wide sheets forming carpets of life. From a distance, these mats can appear almost like frost, or like fabric laid delicately across the sea floor. Some sections shine faintly in the light of your imagination, their surfaces reflecting minerals and tiny grains of sediment. Others are bright white, smooth and even, as though someone has carefully brushed the sea floor clean. These mats are not decorative. They are the foundation of entire ecosystems. The microbes that grow in these mats do not need sunlight. Instead, they draw energy directly from chemicals in the water, just as the microbes around hydrothermal vents do. Some oxidize methane, others use hydrogen sulfide. Many live on the border between oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor water, finding a sweet spot where their chemistry works best. Together, they create thick layers of living tissue that blanket the seafloor, supporting an entire community of animals that depend on them. Around these mats, clusters of mussels begin to appear. They settle in thick layered beds, sometimes growing so densely that their shells form a solid carpet across the ground. These mussels look similar to those in shallow seas, but their lifestyle is completely different. Instead of filtering algae or drifting plant matter, they host specialized bacteria inside their bodies. Those internal bacteria handle the chemical work, breaking down methane or sulfur compounds and turning them into nourishment. The mussels simply provide shelter. It is an elegant partnership that allows them to thrive as a place where traditional food sources do not exist. Next to the mussel beds lie fields of clams. Their shells are pale and smooth, often dusted with the fine sediments drifting down from above. Like the mussels, these clams host bacteria within their tissues, forming a quiet collaboration that allows them to survive in complete darkness. They bury themselves partially in the sediment, siphons extended upward, drawing in the chemicals their internal microbes rely on. As you move through these gardens, the seafloor develops a patchwork of textures and tones. Some areas look as though they are covered in snow, others shimmer with mineral deposits. Still others are shaped by the soft outlines of burrows and tunnels left by worms living close to the mats, feeding on the thick layers of microbial growth. Every patch of white or pale grey is a sign of life, not plant life, but chemical life, a form of growth that feels both alien and entirely natural. The animals that gather here do so for the same reason creatures gather around hydrothermal vents: energy. But the atmosphere is different. Here, the water is cooler, the environment feels calmer. Instead of roaring plumes of heated water, the sea floor is quiet and steady. Instead of towering chimneys, the landscape lies flat, spread out in broad, gentle fields. There are crabs scuttling across the mussel beds, picking at scraps or seeking small animals hiding among the shells. Some of these crabs have pale bodies that blend into the muted colours of the mats. Others carry hints of orange or yellow along their legs. They move with the brisk confidence of creatures that know plenty of hiding places are nearby. Small fish drift along the edges of the gardens, occasionally dipping toward the ground to nibble at tiny organisms hiding within the mat layers. Their movements are slow and careful, as though trying not to disturb the delicate living carpet beneath them. In the gently shifting water, their fins fan out like small banners, catching the faintest currents. Worms of all shapes weave through the sediments beneath the mats. Some are bright red, with feathery openings that help them gather oxygen. Others are pale and nearly invisible against the seafloor. They move with soft, rippling motions, leaving subtle trails behind them. Their presence helps circulate nutrients and oxygen, creating miniature ecosystems within the broader landscape. In some areas, methane seeps up from the ground in tiny bubbles. Microbes gather around these seep points in dense layers, forming bright patches that seem almost hand-painted. These seeps support their own clusters of animals, mussels, clams and shrimp that rely entirely on the constant flow of chemical energy. They create their own rhythm, their own balance. One of the most remarkable things about these gardens is how gentle they appear. On land, gardens grow upward toward the light. Here they spread outward across the ground, forming quiet, horizontal expanses of pale colour. They have no smell, no rustling leaves, no flowers or stems, and yet they feel alive in a way that is unmistakable. Everything here grows with purpose, shaped not by sunlight but by chemistry alone. There is beauty in the contrast. The deep sea is often imagined as empty, lifeless, and barren. Yet here, in places without a single ray of light, the seafloor blossoms with entire communities. Each mussel bed supports dozens of species. Each microbial mat holds layers of life within it. Each clam field creates shelter and pathways for countless tiny organisms. This is not a garden built from plants. It is a garden built from partnerships, between animals and microbes, between chemical gradients and biological needs, between the steady seep of energy and the organisms that gather to use it. It is a reminder that life on Earth has more than one blueprint, more than one way to flourish. These gardens are calm, quiet, and astonishingly resilient. They grow slowly, rely on subtle flows of chemicals, and support creatures perfectly adapted to their unique world. And they stand as a gentle contrast to the fiery vents found elsewhere, offering a softer, more spread-out version of deep-sea productivity. As the pale fields fade behind you and the seafloor grows darker again, the impression of these chemical gardens lingers. They show that even in the deep ocean, where sunlight has never touched, where plants cannot root, and where food is rare, life can still find ways to create entire landscapes of abundance. The abyss begins not with a sudden drop, but with a gradual settling into stillness. The water grows darker, colder, and quieter, until the world around you feels almost suspended in time. Here, the deep sea opens into broad plains that stretch farther than any landscape on land. There are no mountains to interrupt the horizon, no forests, no canyons filled with bright light or sound. Just a vast, uninterrupted space that seems to breathe with a slow, steady rhythm. These plains are some of the largest environments on Earth. They cover more of the planet's surface than deserts, grasslands, tundra and forests combined. If you could walk across them, you could travel for thousands of kilometers without seeing a rise or hill. But walking is impossible here, and the idea of distance loses meaning. The abyss is a world built for drifting, not crossing. It invites you to float, to observe, and to let the quiet settle around you like a soft blanket. The seafloor in this region is often smooth and gently textured, coated in fine sediments that have been settling for millions of years. These sediments fall slowly from above, grain by grain, flake by flake, a patient accumulation of marine snow, dust, minerals, and the remains of long-vanished creatures. Over time, they form a soft surface that holds the memory of everything that has ever sunk to these depths. A kind of quiet history written in layers of silt. Life here is sparse, delicate, and wonderfully unhurried. You may drift for long stretches without seeing anything at all. Then, suddenly, a ghostly shape will appear, a fish with translucent fins hovering motionlessly above the bottom, its body blending so perfectly into the dimness that it seems almost like a daydream taking form. These creatures do not dart or chase. They conserve energy through stillness, waiting for food to drift close, as it eventually does in the patient rhythm of the deep. Small sea cucumbers crawl along the sediment in slow, measured movements. They leave faint trails behind them, subtle signatures marking their quiet journey across the plain. Their bodies flex gently as they feed on particles scattered across the ground. They are soft, persistent, and strangely calming to watch. Occasionally you might notice brittle stars spread across the seafloor like delicate artworks, their thin arms stretched out to catch whatever small morsels pass by. They move with a smooth, unhurried glide, using their arms to push themselves along the sediment in a motion that feels almost like a dance slowed down to its gentlest form. Certain species of fish, called rat-tails, drift just above the ground, their long tapering tails trailing behind them like wisps of smoke. They glide slowly, pausing often, as though each decision about where to move next deserves careful consideration. Their large eyes absorb the faint glimmers of bioluminescence drifting through the water, though even light is rare here. In the calm distance, far from any obvious structure, deep-sea jellyfish pulse upward or downward, sometimes glowing faintly as they move. Each contraction of their bell seems to express a kind of unhurried confidence, as if they already know the ocean will carry them gently wherever they need to go. Most animals in the abyss live simple, energy-efficient lives. Food is scarce, and survival depends on never spending more energy than you gain. Every movement is measured. Every burst of speed is deliberate. The result is a world where motion feels poetic, soft, and restrained. The emptiness of the abyss is part of what gives it such a distinct atmosphere. There are no sudden bursts of activity, no crowds of fish swirling in tight formation, no reefs buzzing with constant motion. Instead, there is an immense, restful openness. It feels like standing alone on a vast plain at dusk, with only the faintest breeze brushing past. This emptiness, however, is not lifelessness. It is a different kind of life, a quiet life, shaped by patience and stillness. Many creatures here have evolved pale colours, slow metabolisms, and delicate bodies that blend into the dim water. Others rely on clever strategies to endure long periods without food. Some species can go weeks or even months between meals, storing energy in specialized tissues or simply lowering their activity until the next opportunity arrives. Occasionally a ripple in the sediment hints at hidden life below the surface. Small worms burrow through the soft ground, creating a network of tiny tunnels and chambers. These worms help aerate the seafloor and recycle nutrients, quietly maintaining the health of the plains. Their presence brings a subtle sense of movement beneath the stillness, a reminder that even the parts of the abyss you cannot see are alive. The deeper regions of the abyss are home to creatures that seem perfectly suited to the quiet. Some squat lobsters perch on small mounds, their bodies angled upward, antennae raised in a posture of gentle alertness. Tiny crustaceans hop lightly across the sediment, leaving brief arcs of motion before settling again. Nothing here wastes energy on unnecessary flourish. The atmosphere of the abyss encourages reflection. The stillness feels like a natural pause, a reminder that the ocean is not always loud, colourful, or crowded. It can be open and subtle too, a place where the vastness itself becomes a kind of beauty. Floating through these endless plains, you begin to appreciate the quiet as something meaningful rather than empty. It gives the creatures space to exist without competition. It allows the rhythm of life to slow to its calmest form. It reveals how vast the deep sea truly is, stretching beyond imagination. And somewhere within this gentle openness, the ocean begins to hint at what lies deeper still. Places where the plains give way to something steeper and more dramatic, shaped not by drifting sediment but by tectonic forces rising from the earth below. The journey into the deep eventually leads to a place where even the vast abyss begins to fall away. The sea floor, once flat and open, suddenly drops into long, narrow valleys that cut into the crust like gentle folds. These are the ocean trenches, some of the deepest places on Earth, where the Hadal Zone begins. The name comes from Hades, the underworld of ancient myth, but the reality is not fiery or frightening. It is calm, cold, and quietly extraordinary. Descending into a trench feels like drifting into a world that exists in its own slow time. The walls rise on either side in steep, shadowed slopes, and the water becomes denser and stiller with each meter. There is no sense of falling. Instead, it feels as though the ocean is simply deepening around you, inviting you into a quieter chamber of its own creation. The pressures here move far beyond anything imaginable on the surface. At the deepest points, the weight of the water above you is tremendous, but the creatures evolved for this environment have bodies shaped to match the pressure exactly, making the force outside and the force inside perfectly balanced. There is no crushing sensation, no strain. Life grows here not by resisting pressure, but by dissolving the need for air-filled spaces or rigid structures that would struggle against it. Softness becomes strength. The deepest fish known to science are snailfish, delicate and almost translucent, with bodies that seem sculpted from drifting clouds rather than solid flesh. Unlike many fish found at lesser depths, snailfish have no air pockets inside them. Their bones are light and flexible, and their muscles are soft, adapted to move smoothly in a world where resistance would cost too much energy. Their shape is gentle, their colours pale, and their movements slow and effortless. They glide rather than swim, as though the water offers them a special kind of patience. Amphipods, small crustaceans that resemble miniature shrimp, thrive in these trenches as well. They can appear delicate with long antennae and pale bodies, but they are surprisingly resilient. Some species feed on the drifting remains of animals that fall into the trenches from above. Others nibble on microbial films that grow on rocks and sediments. Amphipods move in quick but careful bursts, then settle again, letting the dark water hold them suspended between motions. Scattered across the trench floor are small patches of microbial life that survive in ways hard to imagine at the surface. These microbes withstand pressures so high they would crush many other organisms instantly. Their cell walls, proteins and enzymes are shaped specifically for these depths, able to function only in the cold, heavy stillness of the Hadal zone. Bring them upward and they lose their structure, like snowflakes melting at the first touch of warm air. They belong here and only here. The trench landscapes themselves are quiet and understated. The floor is often covered in fine sediment, smoothed by ages of settling particles. Ripples appear here and there, formed not by waves but by subtle currents that travel gently through the deep. The colour palette is soft, dominated by greys and muted browns. There are no bright corals or colourful reefs. Instead, the beauty comes from shape and form, the slow arc of a fish's movement, the delicate lift of a jelly's bell, the faint glimmer of a drifting amphipod catching a trace of bioluminescent light. The animals that live here have behaviours shaped not by scarcity alone, but by steadiness. There is very little disturbance in the Hadal zone. Storms do not reach this deep. Waves are irrelevant. There are no sudden changes in temperature, no flashes of sunlight, no periods of feast or famine as extreme as those in shallower waters. Life here revolves around consistency, a quiet, constant environment where survival depends on patience, gentle movement, and efficient use of energy. Snailfish hunt amphipods with slow, hovering motions, approaching with a grace that feels almost like a drifting feather. Their mouths open softly, their bodies bending with the fluidity of water itself. There is no violence, no rush. Everything in the trenches moves with intention but never with haste. Occasionally larger creatures wander through. Deep-sea eels glide close to the seafloor. Certain species of sea cucumbers drift in a slow, rolling motion, using subtle contractions to propel themselves forward. Tiny starfish cling to rocks, spreading their arms as if feeling for passing currents. Each creature seems aware of the space around it, careful not to waste a single movement. The Hadal zone may sound extreme, but it carries a calm unlike any other environment on Earth. The immense pressure becomes a form of stillness, holding everything in a steady balance that has existed for millions of years. There are no dramatic bursts of activity, no sudden migrations, no bright signals or fast chases. Life here has evolved into a state of quiet adaptation, shaped by the deepest forces of the planet. Even the colours of trench animals reflect this gentleness. Many are pale, soft pinks, whites, or translucent shades that blend into the muted background. Vision is less important here, and camouflage is achieved not by patterns but by simply matching the calm tones of the environment. These deepest regions of the ocean remind us that life is not limited by conditions that appear extreme from a distance. Instead, life finds ways to settle into even the most unlikely of spaces. The trenches are peaceful, stable, and strangely comforting. Despite the immense pressures and eternal darkness, they show that the deep ocean does not merely contain life. It shapes it into forms that flourish in silence. Somewhere far above, light continues to dance on the waves, but down here the ocean holds a serenity that feels untouched. It is a place where the planet's most profound forces meet its most delicate creatures, creating a world that is quiet, enduring, and deeply connected to the ancient rhythms of Earth. The deeper the ocean becomes, the more solid shapes begin to fade away. Muscular fish, armoured crustaceans, and sturdy swimmers gradually give way to creatures that seem less like animals and more like drifting pieces of light. Their bodies are soft, translucent and delicate, made almost entirely of water. They move with currents rather than against them, and glow with soft colours that appear for a moment and vanish just as gently. These other gelatinous drifters of the deep, jellies, siphonophores, ctenophores, and countless other forms that fill the darkness with quiet motion. Jellies are perhaps the best known of these creatures, though the ones in the deep sea often look very different from the familiar shapes seen near the surface. Their bodies are fragile bells, domed umbrellas of transparent tissue that pulse in slow rhythms. Each pulse pushes a little water behind them, and each gentle contraction moves them forward through the dark. They do not hurry, they do not need to. Their method of travel is perfectly suited to the deep, where conservation of energy is essential and rushing serves no purpose. The transparency of their bodies is not simply beautiful, it is practical. In the deep, where predators detect vibrations and faint glimmers rather than colours, being invisible is a tremendous advantage. Many jellies are so clear that they seem to vanish entirely, like ripples in the water that leave no trace. Light passes straight through them, shadows fail to form. A jelly drifting slowly through the dark may be nothing more than a faint outline until a small glimmer catches its surface. Ctenophores, often called comb jellies, carry a different kind of glow. Instead of stinging tentacles, they have rows of tiny beating hairs that catch and scatter whatever light is available. When these hairs move in unison, they create shimmering waves that look like soft rainbows sliding across their bodies. It is a gentle, hypnotic effect, as though the animal is wrapped in drifting aurora. In the deep, these colours are subtle rather than bright, becoming small celebrations of motion rather than bursts of light. Some jelly-like creatures stretch far beyond what the mind expects. Siphonophores, for example, can grow to astonishing lengths. They are not single animals but colonies made of many specialized units, each performing a different role. Some units create propulsion, pulsing steadily to move the entire colony through the water. Others capture prey, dangling long tendrils that glow softly in the dark. Still others take care of reproduction or digestion. Together they form chains that can reach lengths greater than many whales, moving as a single drifting entity. Their bodies shimmer in soft blues and pale whites, almost like floating trails of starlight. Because these creatures are made of such delicate material, sometimes more than 90% water, their interactions with the environment are gentle by necessity. A sudden current can fold them in half. A careless bump might tear their tissue, and yet they thrive in the deep ocean precisely because of their softness. The water supports them completely. The cold slows their movements just enough to protect their fragile forms. The darkness shields them from predators that rely on sight. Despite their delicate structures, many of these drifters are effective predators. A jelly's tentacles may be soft, but they are lined with tiny stinging cells that can paralyze small prey instantly. Ctenophores use sticky cells instead, capturing tiny animals in almost invisible threads. Siphonophores carry long curtains of tentacles that glow subtly, enticing small creatures toward them. Their methods are quiet, elegant. and perfectly suited to a world where flashing lights or quick chases would waste precious energy. When they feed, the movements are smooth and slow. A drifting jelly brushes against a tiny crustacean, and the tentacle curls inward in a graceful arc. A comb jelly drifts through a cloud of microscopic plankton, gathering them gently in its sticky lobes. A siphonophore waits in perfect stillness until something touches one of its glowing threads, then passes the captured prey along its collective body with methodical precision. There is something hypnotic about watching jelly-like creatures drift through the deep. Their pulses feel like slow breathing. Their movements have a softness that is rare on land. Even their shapes seem fluid, changing subtly as they move, as though the water writes their outlines anew with every passing moment. Their bodies catch what little light exists and transform it into glimmering arcs, soft halos, or faint stripes of iridescence that glide along their sides. Bioluminescence plays a special role among these delicate animals. Some jellies flash when disturbed, lighting up sections of the water in brief bursts that feel almost like soft whispers of colour. Others create gentle ripples of light along their tentacles, tiny beacons drifting through the dark. A few species produce glowing clouds when threatened, releasing small drifting sparks that confuse predators long enough for the jelly to slip away. These displays are rarely bright, but they are beautiful in their subtlety, adding an almost dreamlike quality to the deep. It is easy to see why these creatures inspire comparisons to lanterns, feathers, or floating silk. Their bodies respond to currents with such fluid grace that they seem less like animals and more like living movements, and their transparency makes them appear half real, half ghost, as though they exist in the space between matter and light. Many of these species have existed for millions of years, their forms barely changing because they are already so well suited to their environment. They do not need armour. They do not need speed. They simply drift, feeding when food drifts close, glowing when conditions favour it, and pulsing with slow, steady rhythms that match the calm of the deep. Their simplicity is their strength, and their softness is their survival strategy. Watching them for even a moment creates a sense of calm. Their gentle swaying, the soft glow of their tissues, and the quiet patience of their movement all contribute to an atmosphere that feels almost meditative. They move through the water as though time has loosened its grip on them, offering a visual reminder that not every creature lives by urgency. Drifting through regions where jellies, siphonophores, and comb jellies gather creates the feeling of floating through a slow underwater ballet. Each movement is measured, each light is delicate, each body is shaped to let the surrounding water do most of the work. These animals are not defined by complexity or strength, but by their peaceful relationship with the deep. They remind us that life does not always need solid form to succeed. Sometimes it can thrive as something ethereal, gentle and quiet, shaped more by the movement of water and the presence of faint light than by bone or muscle. Far below the restless surface, in the calm darkness where time moves with a different rhythm, some of the oldest living beings on Earth quietly endure. They do not rush, they do not chase, and they do not seek attention. They simply persist, holding their place in the deep as years roll into centuries and centuries slide gently into ages. Down here, long life is not rare. It is the natural rhythm of creatures that grow in slow motion. One of the most extraordinary communities living in this silent world is made of deep-sea corals. Unlike the colourful reefs found in sunlit shallows, these corals grow in complete darkness. They take on pale shades of cream, gold, and smoky grey. Their branches stretch outward in intricate shapes, forming forests that feel ancient even before you learn their age. Some of these corals have lived longer than recorded human history. There are colonies that began growing before early empires formed on land, before writing spread across civilizations, before any human ever carved symbols in clay. Their growth is slow, almost meditative, a few millimeters in a full year. Over centuries, this adds up to great sweeping structures that shape entire deep-sea landscapes. Their skeletons form archives of chemistry and temperature, holding memories of the ocean long before modern climate patterns settled into place. Each layer is a page, each branching limb a record of quiet endurance. Nearby sponges populate the deep with an even older kind of stillness. They do not have bones, muscles, or nerves. Their bodies are porous towers of gentle tissue, pulling water through themselves in a constant, unhurried cycle. Some deep-sea sponges have lived since before the pyramids were built. Their existence has spanned thousands of years, absorbing currents and filtering tiny particles from the water with patient efficiency. They do not move, but that does not make them simple. Their forms are intricate, their symbiosis complex, and their internal communities of microbes thrive in ways that scientists are still learning to understand. Certain sponge species grow into shapes that resemble vases, fans, or delicate glass sculptures. Their structures often appear fragile, but they hold together with remarkable strength. Their skeletons are made from tiny spicules of silica, each one crafted with geometric precision. Millions of these spicules connect to form bodies that feel like ancient temples of soft stone. When currents pass through them, their thin walls ripple just slightly like slow breathing carved into the deep. Even older stories lie hidden beneath the seafloor, where microbes dwell inside the oceanic crust itself. These tiny organisms live in cracks and pores within the rocks, using faint chemical traces as fuel. They reproduce slowly, far more slowly than microbes in warmer, brighter environments. Some might divide only once every few years, and yet they persist generation after generation, forming communities that could remain undisturbed for geological timescales. Their world is a place without hurry, a place where life has adapted to move at the pace of stone. The sediments blanketing the seafloor tell their own quiet stories of deep time. Each layer is like a thin page that settles gently on top of the last. Dust from the atmosphere, particles from drifting marine snow, remnants of creatures that lived and died hundreds of thousands of years ago. All of it settles into a soft archive. In some places, these layers can hold an unbroken record stretching back millions of years. By reading them, scientists can trace shifts in climate, changes in ocean chemistry, and the rise and fall of entire ecological eras. The creatures living among these sediments have adapted to a world where nothing changes quickly. Worms thread through the layers, recycling nutrients at a pace that matches their slow environment. Small crustaceans rest in their burrows, emerging only occasionally to feed. Even the fish that pass through these deep-time landscapes move with a softness that feels almost respectful, as though aware that they are crossing over ground shaped not in decades, but in ages. The calm that defines this part of the ocean seems to influence every living thing. With little disturbance from storms or seasonal changes, life here settles into long, uninterrupted patterns. Energy moves slowly. Growth takes time. Stability becomes the most valuable currency. In this stillness, longevity is not a rare achievement. but a natural result of living in a place where patience is the guiding force. When you imagine a coral that began growing before human writing existed, or a sponge that has filtered water since ancient civilizations first learned to build with stone, the deep sea feels less like a distant place and more like a different kind of time. A time measured not in days, seasons, or years, but in slow rhythms that shape life with gentleness. There is a peacefulness in thinking about these ancient beings drifting quietly through the centuries. They do not worry about change or chase after moments of abundance. They simply endure, shaped by the unwavering conditions of the deep and carried forward by an environment that rarely shifts. Even the stones on the seafloor carry reminders of deep time. Ridges formed by tectonic forces hint at movements that take place over spans longer than human civilization. Mineral deposits grow layer by layer, marking eras instead of decades. Everything here, animal, microbe, sediment, stone, exists on scales that encourage stillness. These long-lived communities remind us that life does not always need speed or intensity to flourish. In the deep sea, survival belongs to the patient, the steady and the quietly persistent. Beauty grows slowly, in pale branches of coral and softly shimmering sponges. Histories unfold not through dramatic events, but through the steady accumulation of time itself. The deep sea's oldest inhabitants do not mark the centuries. They simply continue, shaping their world with subtlety and endurance, and their presence offers a quiet reassurance. Even in the coldest, darkest places on Earth, life finds its way, not by racing forward, but by settling deeply into the long, peaceful rhythm of time. In the deep ocean, where the water is cold, the light is absent, and food drifts down in tiny, unpredictable fragments, life takes on a rhythm that would feel impossibly slow at the surface. Movements stretch out like long thoughts. Heartbeats pause between pulses. Entire lifespans unfold at a pace that mirrors the steady stillness of the surrounding water. Down here, slowness is not a limitation. It is a refined survival strategy shaped by an environment that rewards calm patience over speed. Low temperatures influence everything. Cold water slows chemical reactions inside cells, meaning that deep-sea creatures burn energy far more slowly than animals living closer to the surface. While a warm water fish might need constant food to fuel its busy metabolism, a deep-sea fish can go for astonishing stretches without a single meal. Its body is tuned to make the most of whatever nourishment arrives, and to wait gracefully when nothing does. Some creatures in the deep live on such a lean supply of calories that their daily energy use is equivalent to a surface animal's slow exhale. Because energy is so precious, many deep-sea animals move with extraordinary restraint. A fish may hover motionless for hours, shifting only the slightest amount to maintain balance. Jelly-like creatures pulse once, then drift for long intervals, letting the current carry them without resistance. Even predators known for their sharp teeth and dramatic designs often behave with surprising gentleness, waiting quietly for prey to drift close rather than wasting energy on pursuit. Certain deep-sea species move so slowly that watching them feels like looking through an old time-lapse sequence played at normal speed. Sea cucumbers glide across the sediment in tiny increments, their bodies stretching and contracting in almost meditative ripples. Some brittle stars extend their arms in slow arcs that look like the first stages of a yawn. A deep-sea snail might take hours to cross a patch of seafloor, only a few body lengths wide. Nothing here is rushed because nothing needs to be. This slow rhythm extends to growth as well. Many animals take years to reach maturity. Some do not reproduce until decades have passed, and once they do reach adulthood, they often continue living for an astonishingly long time. The Greenland shark, found in deep cold waters, may live for several centuries, growing just a few millimeters each year. Its movements are patient, its metabolism quiet, its lifestyle perfectly calibrated to a cold environment where speed serves little purpose. Elsewhere in the deep sea, certain corals and sponges persist for thousands of years, becoming fixtures of their environment while civilizations rise and fall far above. Their structures expand so slowly that a century might add no more than a gentle widening of a branch or a slight thickening of a stem. They survive because they ask so little of the world around them, drawing energy from tiny particles and chemical traces, storing what they gather with astonishing efficiency. Even smaller animals adopt this unhurried way of life. Deep-sea amphipods feed on scraps of organic matter that drift down through the water, and when those scraps are scarce, the amphipods simply slow their activity further. Their metabolisms adjust to the environment like dimming lanterns, always glowing softly but never burning too brightly. Small worms in the sediment move at a pace that seems matched to the slow falling of marine snow. Some microbes divide so infrequently that an entire generation may span years rather than hours. Strength in the deep comes from this slowness. Fast metabolisms would be impossible to maintain. Large, flashy displays would be wasteful. Quick reactions would drain precious reserves. So life here is designed around conservation. Muscles are minimal, movements are efficient, bodies are shaped to float rather than to fight gravity. Even senses adapt to this slower world. Instead of darting eyes scanning for movement, many deep-sea creatures rely on subtle vibrations, chemical signatures, and pressure changes that unfold gradually. Despite the quiet pace, there is remarkable resilience in these animals. A deep-sea fish that moves only occasionally can survive long periods without food. A jelly that drifts on currents rather than pushing against them can conserve energy for weeks. A sponge that filters water at a slow but steady rate can build a life that lasts for ages. Slowness becomes a form of mastery, a refined way of existing in a place where time stretches wide. There is also a beauty to this unhurried existence. Watching a deep-sea creature glide through the darkness feels almost like observing the ocean itself breathe. Each motion carries a softness that invites calm. Each pause feels intentional rather than idle. It is as though the deep has taught its inhabitants not to hurry, offering them the quiet assurance that patience is the surest path to survival. Slow living in the deep is not a sign of weakness, it is a quiet strength, a deep, enduring resilience. These animals have found a way to stretch small amounts of energy into long, rich lives, using the cold and darkness as allies rather than obstacles. Their bodies hold stories that unfold over decades, centuries, and sometimes millennia, all written in the gentle rhythms of deep-sea calm. Life in the deep ocean reminds us that survival does not always belong to the fastest or the loudest. Sometimes it belongs to those who move softly, wait patiently, and settle into the long harmony of their environment. In the deep, slowness is not simply a way of living. It is a kind of quiet wisdom shaped by the cold, timeless sea. The deep sea holds a kind of memory that no library, archive, or written record can match. It remembers quietly, storing its history grain by grain, settling the stories of ages into soft layers on the sea floor. Nothing down here rushes, nothing erases. Time moves so slowly that the past is preserved not in pages or photographs, but in sediments, shells, and chemical whisperings left behind by countless generations of drifting life. Imagine the seafloor as a vast, gentle snowfall that never melts. Every day, tiny particles descend from above, fragments of dead plankton, dust blown from continents, minerals rising from vents, and the remains of animals that once swam through brighter waters. Most are too small to notice individually, but together they settle into thin layers, forming a timeline that stretches back millions of years. The deeper you go into the sediment, the older the world becomes. Each layer holds clues about a moment in Earth's past. A shift in colour might mark a time when volcanic ash drifted over the ocean. A change in the types of microfossils can reveal ancient temperature swings, long-forgotten periods of warming or cooling. The deep sea keeps all of this tucked away in quiet order. No storms disturb it. No waves churn it. The calm water allows the layers to remain undisturbed, like a book whose pages no one has ever turned to quickly. Cold, oxygen-poor conditions help preserve fossils that would decay quickly elsewhere. Tiny shells of microscopic plankton remain intact for millions of years. The bones of deep-sea fish settle gently onto the mud and stay there, untouched by scavengers that can strip a carcass clean in shallower waters. Occasionally a larger creature's remains drift down, a shark, a giant squid or a whale, and leave behind shapes that scientists later find pressed into the sediment like signatures. Just as remarkable as the fossils themselves are the chemical traces hidden within the seafloor. Every creature that lived in the ocean absorbed elements from the water around it. When it died, those elements settled with its remains, locking information about ocean temperatures, acidity, circulation patterns, and even atmospheric carbon levels into the sediments. By studying these subtle chemical patterns, scientists can reconstruct entire chapters of Earth's climate history. The deep sea becomes a patient narrator, telling stories of warm eras and ice ages, rising seas and shifting continents. Whale falls offer their own unique kind of archive. When a whale's body drifts down to the deep-sea floor, it becomes the centre of a decades-long ecological story. At first, scavengers arrive, feeding on the soft tissue until only bones remain. Years later, different species move in, nibbling at what the initial visitors left behind. Still later, microbes take over, breaking down oils and fats buried deep within the bone. Each stage leaves its own trace, marks on the sediment, changes in local chemistry, small alterations in the surrounding ecosystem. A single whale fall can be read almost like a slow unfolding novel, with different creatures acting as successive chapters. Elsewhere, gentle currents deposit fine silt that traps delicate life forms exactly as they were in their final moments. Tiny shells arranged in graceful spirals, the impression of an ancient worm trail. Even the faint outlines of organisms too fragile to survive anywhere else for long. These shapes linger quietly, waiting for someone to uncover them hundreds of thousands or millions of years later. Even the rocks beneath the deep-sea floor store their own histories. Fluids within the crust carry chemical messages about conditions far below the surface. Microbes living inside these rocks influence the composition of minerals around them, creating subtle signatures that act as bookmarks from distant eras. In some areas, the crust holds water that has been trapped for such immense spans of time that it predates entire chapters of human civilization. What makes the deep sea such a powerful archive is its tranquility. Unlike shallow environments that undergo constant disturbance, the deep remains steady. Temperature barely changes. Currents move slowly. Light does not intrude. This stability allows delicate records to accumulate undisturbed, building a continuous archive that stretches back farther than many landscapes on land. There is something profoundly peaceful about this slow recording of time. The deep sea does not hurry to store its history. It simply gathers what drifts down, layer after layer, preserving the traces of ancient climates, vanished species, and long-forgotten events. Everything settles, everything stays. Even the living creatures here exist within this archive. Their bodies will someday become part of the story themselves. A snailfish drifting near the seafloor may one day leave behind faint traces in the sediment. A jelly might dissolve completely, but its chemical signature will become part of the water that settles into the next layer below. Life and history intertwine in a quiet, continuous exchange. Thinking about the deep sea as an archive gives the darkness a different feeling. It becomes less a place of mystery and more a place of memory, where ages rest gently on top of older ages. The deep does not forget. It carries the planet's past with a calm that mirrors its still waters. And as you drift through this world of slow-gathered stories, it becomes clear that the deep ocean is not only a realm of unusual creatures and quiet landscapes, it is also one of Earth's most patient storytellers, preserving the long arcs of time in silence, waiting for those who know how to read its layers. Sound behaves differently in the deep ocean than it does in the air above. On the surface, sound scatters easily, fading into the open sky. But underwater, especially in the cold, dense layers far below the waves, sound can travel astonishing distances. A single call, a single creak, a single shifting of seafloor rock can echo through the water for kilometers, sometimes even hundreds of kilometers, crossing entire regions of the deep without losing its clarity. The result is a landscape where sound becomes one of the most important ways life communicates, even in places where creatures rarely see one another. Water carries sound so well because its molecules are packed closely together. When something creates a vibration, a whale's call, a shifting current, or even a distant volcanic tremor, those molecules pass the vibration along quickly and efficiently. The sound moves through the water in smooth, continuous waves. In the deep, where temperatures are low and pressure is high, the conditions become even more favorable for long-distance travel. The cold water slows the vibrations just slightly, allowing them to stretch and settle into a channel where they can glide forward with minimal loss of energy. Yet for all its ability to carry sound, the deep sea remains one of the quietest places on Earth. There are no breaking waves, no rain striking the surface, no storms shaking the water. Human noise rarely reaches these depths, except in certain busy shipping routes or near research equipment. The farther you descend, the more the everyday sounds of the world fade away, replaced by a calm so complete it feels almost like drifting through a held breath. The quiet is not absolute, though. It is filled with subtle sounds, soft clicks, distant pulses, and the occasional deep hum that resonates through the water like the low note of a distant instrument. Many deep-sea creatures rely on these quiet frequencies to communicate across the darkness. Whales, for example, send low calls through the deep ocean that can travel incredible distances. Some scientists believe these calls may reach across entire ocean basins, carrying messages from one side of the world to the other. These calls drift through the deep like long, gentle threads, weaving whales into a loose, far-reaching network of sound. Even creatures that do not produce elaborate songs still leave acoustic signatures. Certain fish create faint drumming sounds with specialized muscles. Crustaceans sometimes make clicking noises as they move or feed. Some deep-sea squid release rapid bursts of sound, though the mechanism remains mysterious. These noises are soft and scattered, but they create a quiet tapestry of life. The deep is silent when compared to shallower waters, yet never completely without voice. Hydrophones, special underwater microphones used by researchers, have captured some of the strangest sounds ever recorded on Earth. Many of them remain mysterious. Some are low rumbles that come and go without clear pattern. Others resemble long sighs rising from the darkness. A few sound almost like distant mechanical groans, though they come from regions far from human activity. These recordings carry names that match their character: the bloop, the upsweep, the whistle. Each one has its own signature, its own rhythm, its own sense of place. The bloop, once thought to be the call of an enormous animal, turned out to be the sound of ice shifting and cracking in polar waters. But even knowing that, the sound still feels like something alive, its rising pitch echoing through the deep like a creature exhaling softly. Other sounds remain unexplained. The upsweep, heard seasonally for decades, still has no confirmed source. Scientists have suggested volcanic activity, but evidence remains inconclusive. The sound persists like a recurring dream the deep has never fully revealed. Some deep-sea environments create their own acoustic atmospheres. Around hydrothermal vents, the water crackles softly as minerals meet the cold surrounding ocean. Tiny bubbles pop and hiss in delicate bursts. Near methane seeps, gentle fizzing accompanies the release of gas from the seafloor. Even the slow shifting of tectonic plates generates deep, groaning tones that resonate like ancient breaths. These geological sounds contribute to the deep sea's quiet orchestra, a blend of life and planet whispering through the darkness. For many animals, sound is not just communication but guidance. Light is nearly absent, and chemical cues drift slowly, but sound travels quickly and reliably. Whales use it to navigate long migrations. Fish follow faint cues to breeding grounds. Some species may even sense distant disturbances, a landslide, a shifting current, or a predator's movement, purely through subtle vibrations moving through the water. Sound becomes a way of seeing without light, a form of awareness perfectly adapted to the deep. Listening to the deep see-through recordings can feel surprisingly comforting. The long, low tones have a calming quality, their slow rise and fall matching the patience of the ocean itself. Even the mysterious sounds feel soft rather than threatening. They echo the deep's gentle rhythm, a reminder that the ocean holds a vastness filled not with noise, but with spacious calm. The quiet of the deep is not the absence of sound, but the presence of space. Space between pulses, space between movements, space where tiny noises travel unhurriedly across huge distances. It is a soundscape defined by calmness, shaped by water that carries everything smoothly and evenly. Down here, sound does not rush. It drifts, settles, and lingers, just like the creatures it belongs to. The acoustic landscape of the deep sea offers something rare, a way to connect with a world where motion is slow, light is scarce, and life speaks softly. Every distant echo, every faint call, every mysterious hum tells part of the story of a realm that communicates through patience. In the deep, sound becomes a gentle thread binding creatures, landscapes, and ages together in a quiet, resonant harmony. The deep sea is often described as alien, not because it is strange in the dramatic sense, but because it feels so far removed from the parts of Earth shaped by sunlight and weather. Its darkness, its pressure, its quiet, and its unusual ecosystems give it an atmosphere that mirrors something we usually imagine existing far beyond our planet. As scientists explore the deep, they are reminded again and again that this environment may be the closest analogue we have to the hidden oceans that could exist elsewhere in the cosmos. Far from Earth, beneath the icy crusts of moons like Europa and Enceladus, lie vast oceans kept liquid by the warmth rising from their interiors. These oceans are sealed away from sunlight by thick shells of ice. No rays of dawn ever reach them. No shifting seasons shape their currents. And yet, the warmth from below, produced by gravitational flexing or geological activity, could create regions that mirror hydrothermal vents on Earth. This possibility connects our deepest waters with places that orbit distant worlds. On Europa, the ice surface is scarred with cracks and streaks that hint at tidal forces stretching and bending the crust. Beneath that frozen shell lies an ocean that may be deeper than any found on Earth. If hydrothermal vents exist there, they could release chemicals into the water just as vents do in our own oceans. On Enceladus, geysers erupt through fractures at the South Pole, sending plumes of water vapor and microscopic ice grains into space. These grains contain salts, organic compounds, and hints of chemical reactions that resemble those found near Earth's vents. It is one of the strongest clues that active, energy-rich environments may be hidden beneath that moon's bright exterior. This connection between deep-sea vents and potential extraterrestrial habitats is powerful because it suggests a universal principle. Life does not need sunlight to begin or continue. On Earth, chemosynthesis has proven that ecosystems can flourish using chemicals instead of light as their source of energy. Microbes at vent sites feed on hydrogen sulfide or methane, building the foundation for entire communities of worms, clams, crabs, and fish. If the same conditions exist elsewhere, liquid water, a source of chemical energy, and the right kinds of molecules, then similar microbial communities could emerge. Such life would not need to resemble the bright surface creatures we often imagine when thinking about extraterrestrial biology. Instead, it might look more like the deep-sea microbes that coat vent walls in shimmering layers, perhaps like the tubeworm symbionts that work quietly inside their hosts, or like the tiny crustaceans that drift through our darkest waters. The deep sea shows that life can be soft, slow, and subtle, thriving without grand displays or abundant resources. Even the physical adaptations of deep-sea creatures offer clues. Animals that live under crushing pressure often lack air-filled spaces, relying instead on soft tissues and flexible structures. If life exists on Europa or Enceladus, it may share this design. In an environment without sunlight, many creatures might develop little or no vision, instead relying on chemical cues or gentle pressure changes to detect their surroundings. This is similar to how certain deep-sea fish sense movements in the water, or how jellies navigate using faint gradients rather than sight. The darkness of extraterrestrial oceans would not be a barrier to life. The deep sea proves that darkness can support entire worlds. For many deep-sea creatures, bioluminescence becomes the closest equivalent to sunlight, a way of signaling, hunting, or simply existing with a little more presence. If alien oceans support life, they might shine with similar soft glimmers, gentle pulses of light drifting through silent water. There is an elegance to this idea. Life emerging independently in two separate worlds, using the same chemical processes, shaped by similar geological forces, adapted to similar darkness. It suggests that the deep sea is not an oddity, but a blueprint, a demonstration that biology can flourish in quiet, hidden places. Of course, this connection is not certainty. The deep sea does not reveal what alien life must look like, only what it can look like under similar conditions, but even this is powerful. When researchers imagine Europa's ocean or Enceladus's subsurface seas, they often speak of them with the same language used to describe Earth's trenches and vent fields. They imagine slow drifters, chemical feeders, microbial mats, and perhaps larger forms that glide through the dark with the patience seen in many deep-sea species. The deep becomes a bridge between Earth and the cosmos. The parallels extend further. Just as sediments on Earth's seafloor hold records of ancient climates, similar layers could accumulate in extraterrestrial oceans. Just as chemical gradients feed microbial communities, alien vents might support their own networks of life. The deep sea teaches us that ecosystems do not need abundant energy, rapid change, or bright light to endure. They can survive on whispers of activity, on slow trickles of nutrients, on long periods of quiet stability. In this way, the deep sea feels like a window not into our past, but into a possibility. A calm reminder that life may be far more adaptable than our surface world suggests. It shows how biology can bloom in darkness, how ecosystems can rise from chemistry alone, and how resilience takes many forms. If life ever appears beyond Earth, it may not resemble forests or animals or anything shaped by sunlight. It may look more like the gentle communities growing around our hydrothermal vents, drifting through the abyss with slow grace. The deep sea offers a peaceful, grounded way to imagine life elsewhere, not with fantastical creatures or impossible forms, but with the quiet persistence seen in Earth's own hidden oceans. In this shared darkness, Earth's deep and the possible oceans of distant moons, life finds a way to endure, and by studying the deep sea, we learn not just about our own planet, but about the universe's capacity for calm, patient, subtle forms of existence. The deep sea is often described as mysterious, but that word does not fully capture its quiet vastness. It is not simply unknown, it is largely unseen, untouched, and unrecorded. More than half of our planet lies in deep water, yet only a small fraction of it has been explored directly. Most of its valleys, mountains, and plains have never been visited by an instrument, let alone a human. In many areas, no camera has ever passed by, no robot has hovered, no sample has been collected. The deep remains Earth's most hidden realm, and because of that, countless creatures may still drift through its darkness without any record of their existence. Scientists estimate that the majority of species living in the deep sea have not yet been discovered. This is not a wild guess, but a reasonable conclusion drawn from patterns seen across decades of deep ocean exploration. Almost every time a new region is surveyed, new species appear. Strange fish, delicate gelatinous shapes, tiny crustaceans, and microbes unlike anything previously known. In some expeditions, researchers have found dozens of new species in a single dive, tucked into one small patch of seafloor. Extrapolate that across the enormous scale of unexplored terrain, and you begin to appreciate how many secrets may still exist. The difficulty is simple. Reaching the deep is hard. It requires specialized equipment, sturdy vehicles, and long, carefully planned missions. For every minute spent observing the deep, months of preparation are needed. The pressure crushes ordinary machines. The darkness hides detail. the cold slows electronics. The environment is so demanding that many areas have remained entirely unobserved since the ocean first formed. Because of this, there are vast plains that no camera has swept across, trenches so deep that only a handful of dives have brushed their edges, and rugged formations where steep slopes create hidden corners invisible from above. Each of these unvisited spaces could host animals adapted to those exact conditions, creatures shaped by pressure, cold, and isolation in ways that differ from anything we know. Some unexplored regions lie near hydrothermal vents and seeps. These ecosystems support specialized life, and where there is geological activity, there is often biological activity too. Yet most vents are undiscovered. Scientists suspect thousands of them exist, each one a potential hub of life built from chemical energy. It is entirely possible that some of Earth's most remarkable animals live at vents no one has seen, their bodies glowing softly in the darkness, their movements slow and steady in the warm water rising from the planet's crust. Other mysteries may hide along the slopes of deep trenches, where steep walls create shadows and pockets untouched by sunlight for all of Earth's history. These slopes provide habitats with subtle differences in pressure, temperature, and chemical composition. Life in these places may have evolved along isolated paths, diverging into species that exist nowhere else. Even now, some of the deepest dwelling snailfish species were discovered only recently, gliding just above the seafloor in regions once thought too harsh to support vertebrates. Then there are the giant gelatinous forms, creatures so delicate that they are often destroyed before they can be studied. Many of these animals barely leave a trace when caught in nets, collapsing into transparent threads. Cameras have captured glimpses of enormous siphonophores that stretch farther than whales, drifting like living tapestries in the water. But how many of these fragile giants drift out of view, too delicate to be captured, too faint to be seen unless the light lands on them at just the right angle? The chances are high that many species of gelatinous drifters have never been observed at all. Microbial life in the deep is even more mysterious. Tiny organisms thrive in sediments, within rocks, around vents, and inside the pores of the crust. Many have never been isolated or sequenced. Their metabolisms may follow pathways unknown to science. Some may survive on chemical gradients so subtle that they would seem inhospitable anywhere else. These microbes likely form the largest pool of undiscovered species on Earth, living quietly in every corner of the deep. Large animals may also remain unseen. The ocean has revealed giant squid, colossal jellyfish, long-bodied eels, and fish adapted to pressures unimaginable at the surface. It is reasonable to think that equally strange forms may remain hidden, especially in the vast midwater regions where creatures can roam without ever approaching the seafloor. Many of these open water depths stretch for kilometers at a time, forming a three-dimensional wilderness where even a large animal could drift unnoticed for centuries. The deep's darkness is not a hint of emptiness, but an invitation to imagine what might still be there. This is not speculation without foundation. It is grounded in the knowledge that every expedition, even those in well-studied areas, uncovers new shapes, new colors, new behaviors. Some animals are small and subtle. Others turn out to be far larger than researchers expect. The deep sea has a way of revealing creatures that feel both gentle and surprising, as though they have been shaped by the same quietness that defines their world. What makes the idea of undiscovered life so soothing is that it feels inevitable rather than uncertain. The ocean is simply too vast, too complex, and too inaccessible for us to have found everything. Somewhere in a trench, a fish may glide through the water with translucent fins no one has yet seen. On a distant plain, a soft-bodied animal may leave patterns in the sediment that have never been recorded. Along an unvisited ridge, a colony of coral or sponge may grow undisturbed, holding memories of centuries beyond our reach. The deep sea invites curiosity not through drama, but through gentle wonder. Its secrets drift slowly. Its new species appear quietly. Its unseen creatures move through their world as they always have, unaware of whether they are known or unknown. Thinking about the life still hidden in this vast darkness does not spark fear. It brings a sense of peace, a reminder that our planet still contains mysteries, still holds beauty waiting to be found, and still carries stories in places untouched by light. Somewhere in the deep, countless creatures continue their slow, graceful lives, unseen for now but no less real, moving with the calm rhythm of an ocean that always keeps a little more in reserve. Exploring the deep sea requires tools that can travel through environments no human body could ever endure. The pressure alone would flatten ordinary equipment, and the darkness is so complete that even the brightest sunlight fades long before reaching these depths. And yet scientists continue to venture downward with quiet determination, using machines built to move slowly, gently and safely through a world where everything must be treated with care. Submersibles are among the most iconic vehicles used to investigate the deep. These small, sturdy craft are built to hold one or two people in a reinforced sphere, usually made from thick layers of metal or transparent materials that can withstand the weight of the ocean, pressing in from all directions. Inside, the explorers sit surrounded by tiny windows or cameras, watching the deep unfold in slow motion as the submersible drifts downward. The journey can take hours. The descent is calm and steady, like drifting in a floating elevator made of quiet light. Every movement of a submersible is deliberate. On the seafloor, even the lightest motion can stir up clouds of fine sediment that take long minutes to settle again. Scientists pilot these craft with patience, easing forward at gentle speed so the environment remains undisturbed. The beams from their lights stretch only a short distance into the darkness, illuminating whatever creatures move through their path. A drifting jelly, a delicate worm, a lonely fish gliding just above the mud. These moments often feel dreamlike, as if the deep is allowing small glimpses of its hidden world. Because human-occupied submersibles are expensive and difficult to operate, much of deep-sea exploration now relies on remotely operated vehicles. These robots are connected to a ship above by a long cable that carries commands downward and sends video back to the surface. From the deck of a research vessel, a team of scientists carefully guides the robot's movements using consoles and screens. The robot hovers with small thrusters, moving with the slow grace needed to navigate such a fragile place. ROVs carry high-quality cameras that can capture the fine details of life in the deep without disturbing it. Their lights are controlled carefully to avoid overwhelming sensitive animals, and their robotic arms can gently collect samples when needed. Watching an ROV in motion is a reminder that exploration does not have to be forceful. It can be soft, thoughtful, and patient. Autonomous underwater vehicles offer another approach. Unlike submersibles and ROVs, these robots are not controlled from above. They travel alone, following long programmed paths for hours or even days at a time. They glide through deep water in silent arcs, mapping the seafloor, recording sound, measuring temperature, or capturing images along their route. When their mission is complete, they slowly rise to the surface and wait to be found by the ship again. These autonomous robots allow scientists to cover far greater distances than they could with human-operated craft. A single mission might reveal hidden canyons, unexpected ridges, or gentle plains no one knew existed. They help provide the broader context that makes individual dives more meaningful. But even these advanced machines must move slowly. Rushing could damage delicate ecosystems or cloud the water with disturbed sediment. The challenges of deep-sea exploration require not just strong machines but mindful behavior. The creatures that live in these depths are often soft-bodied or sensitive to light. A beam that is too bright can cause stress. A current created by a propeller can displace a fragile animal. Even the act of collecting a sediment sample must be done with gentle precision, using low suction or light touches to avoid harming the life that might be hiding within the mud. Because the deep sea is so vast, progress in studying it is naturally slow. A research vessel may spend several days reaching a study area, then hours preparing equipment before the first dive even begins. A single descent can take most of a day, with scientists watching the screens carefully, documenting everything they see with quiet excitement. When the dive ends, the long ascent begins, and the team waits patiently for the submersible or robot to return to the surface. Once it does, hours more are spent reviewing what was found, preserving samples, and planning the next day's journey. Bit by bit, the deep sea reveals itself, not quickly, not in bursts of dramatic discovery, but in a steady accumulation of knowledge that mirrors the slow rhythms of the ocean itself. Despite the challenges, each new expedition reminds scientists why this work matters. The deep sea holds ecosystems unlike any others on Earth, places powered by chemical energy instead of sunlight, communities that live at pressures far beyond human imagination, and creatures that move with a grace perfectly suited to the calm darkness. These environments offer clues about Earth's history, its stability, and even its future. Exploration also helps protect these delicate worlds. As more is learned about the deep, awareness grows about how fragile many of its habitats are. Gentle observation leads to better stewardship, allowing scientists and policymakers to make thoughtful choices about conservation and sustainable use of the ocean. Every piece of technology used in the deep, from the smallest camera to the largest submersible, is ultimately a tool for understanding, not conquering. The machines move slowly because the environment demands patience. They shine softly because the animals beneath the waves depend on darkness. They collect carefully because life in the deep has evolved to thrive without disturbance. The deep sea encourages a kind of exploration that aligns perfectly with its own nature. Steady, calm, attentive. It rewards those who move gently and listen closely. And with each quiet dive, the hidden world below becomes just a little less mysterious, but no less beautiful. The journey back toward the surface begins with a soft sense of release, as though the deep is gently letting go. Nothing pushes you upward, nothing rushes you along. The ascent unfolds in slow motion, mirroring the calm descent that brought you into the quiet world below. Down in the cold depths, the darkness feels complete and steady. But as you rise, the water begins to shift almost imperceptibly. The deep gives way to layers touched by faint patterns of light, each one a subtle reminder that the surface is drawing nearer. The first change you notice is the brightness. It is not sudden or sharp. Instead, the water lightens gradually, turning from absolute black to soft shades of blue-grey. The glow is not strong enough to see clearly, but it is enough to sense that the world around you is widening. Shapes become easier to trace. The darkness grows textured rather than uniform. It feels as though the ocean is slowly waking up. With the shift in light comes a change in colour. In the deepest layers, almost everything appears muted or pale, shaped more by outline than by hue. But as the ascent continues, creatures begin to show delicate hints of transparency, silver or cool violet. Jellies drifting upward catch the faint blue light and glow with gentle halos. Fish that once blended perfectly into the dark reveal small reflective patches along their bodies, tiny flashes of silver that shimmer as they move. The temperature rises in equally subtle ways. The cold of the deep has a dense, still quality, almost like a soft weight. Higher up, the water becomes ever so slightly warmer, and that warmth brings a quiet sense of lift. Currents grow smoother too, spreading broad, unhurried flows of water through the mid-depths. With every metre gained, the ocean reveals a little more motion, a little more expression, as though its upper layers are whispering back into your awareness. Sound changes as well. In the deep, the quiet is almost perfect, broken only by the occasional soft click or distant rumble carried from faraway geological activity. But rising toward the twilight layers brings a low chorus of new noises, faint drumming from schools of fish, gentle pulses from distant whales, the soft rustle of animals moving through the mid-water like slow rain drifting sideways. None of these sounds are overwhelming. They arrive with the same peaceful pacing as everything else in the ascent. As you move farther up, you begin passing through layers where animals gather in greater numbers. Small fish drift in loose groups, shimmering as they shift direction. Lanternfish hover in patches, their gentle glow fading as the water brightens. Squid glide past with smooth, confident motions, their bodies catching and scattering the growing light. Even here, where life becomes more abundant, the mood remains calm. There is no frenzy, no rush, just a sense of movement returning gradually to the world. The faintest beams of sunlight begin to appear next, stretching downward like soft ribbons of pale gold. They do not reach far, but after so long in darkness they feel bright, even though they arrive in thin, delicate streaks. The water around you takes on a gentle blue tint, and the colours of the animals shift again. Red hues begin to disappear from certain species as you rise, replaced by silvers and soft browns that better suit the lighter surroundings. Eyes that once had to amplify every photon now adjust to the steady glow filtering down from distant waves. The ascent becomes a kind of gentle homecoming. The pressure lightens without you feeling it directly, but the animals around you reflect the difference. Bodies become more muscular, shapes more familiar, outlines more defined. The soft, drifting creatures of the deep give way to swimmers built for brighter waters. And still, the upward journey remains peaceful, shaped by the steady presence of light spreading slowly through the water. Soon you enter layers where the sunlight becomes strong enough to reveal true colours. Blues brighten, greens appear. The water no longer feels like a vast shadowed expanse, but a space filled with soft luminosity. Schools of fish pass by like shifting curtains of motion, moving with practiced synchrony that feels almost choreographed. Turtles may drift overhead, their flippers sweeping through the water in slow, assured strokes. The world becomes familiar again, its motions and shapes echoing the parts of the ocean most people imagine when they think of the sea. Rising even farther, the warmth increases more noticeably. The water feels lighter, more active, filled with tiny drifting particles that dance in the growing sunlight. Sounds become richer too, with the distant murmur of waves mixing into the underwater world. Even the light itself begins to spread in broad, gentle sheets, turning the water a clear blue that seems to stretch upward without end. Approaching the surface brings a soft sense of completion. After drifting through darkness, through quiet forests of coral, through plains as broad as continents, and through trenches shaped by ancient forces, the bright world above feels both familiar and new. The ocean shows its full range here, from the calm depths to the glowing shallows, each layer contributing its own quiet beauty. As you rise toward the topmost water, the boundary between sea and sky begins to shimmer. The surface becomes a film of moving silver, rippling and bending the light in endless patterns. For a moment, you drift beneath it, watching the waves from below as they carve shifting shadows across the water. The light above feels close enough to touch. Breaking through the surface is gentle rather than dramatic. The water gives way, and the air greets you with its soft warmth and spaciousness. The world brightens completely, revealing open sky, distant clouds, and the familiar rhythm of waves rolling calmly across the ocean. Returning to the surface after such a long, peaceful journey feels like waking from a dream, not with a jolt, but with a lingering sense of calm. The deep sea remains below, holding its mysteries and quiet stories, unchanged by your passing. And as the sunlight settles around you, there is a quiet comfort in knowing that beneath the bright surface, an entire world continues to drift in its own slow, timeless rhythm. The deep sea is a very quiet place, and spending time imagining it has a way of slowing everything down. Life there moves gently, uses very little energy, and takes its time. Nothing rushes, nothing competes for attention. It is a part of the world that feels steady and unhurried. Throughout this journey you pass through cold water, glowing animals, wide open plains, deep trenches,